Welcome to E-Pathshala. I am Dr. Chandrasekhar Damble, ICSSR Senior Fellow at Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bengaluru. We are going to discuss about the relationship between language and education. Human beings are also animals, but they are super animals because they can speak out of their mind. That means they can understand the feelings of themselves as well as the feelings of others. They can express their feelings. They can give solutions to the problems of others, and thus all this what they can do is by using the language. And because of the language, the human society has grown with culture. So therefore a very close relationship can be found between language and culture, and education is having the responsibility to disseminate the culture, to understand the progress of culture, civilization, and give a direction to it. So in this regard, the particular module related to language and education, which is in the course of society and education, is to be taken with quite seriousness with regard to the language in a plural linguistic setup in the modern society. Today's society is such that the linguistic complexity is so great that an individual simultaneously speaks in one language of his own where he has developed it in his house, whereas he has to interact with other people in another language which is learned in the society. So therefore in the multilingual setup, the role of language in education as well as using the language for the educational purposes has become a very important concern for educationists as well as to the sociologists. From this angle, this particular module has got so significance in the context that how the different branches of education have grown and how they are giving importance to the language as such. For example, the education of engineering, to what extent they give importance to the language, whereas the education in humanities, how they should use the language in order to reach the people, has become a most important focus in this particular chapter. Language is an essential tool of education. The aim of education is to impart knowledge to the younger generation using language as the means of communication. If the teacher uses the same language known to the student, then learning becomes easy. In other words, information gets converted into knowledge effectively due to the ease with which both the teacher and the taught can handle the teaching-learning process. The most effective mode of communication at the elementary school level is the regional language, which generally happens to be the mother tongue. Generally, a language that people speak in family clusters, neighborhood, or in a select settings is known as a dialect. It is a variant of a language spoken in a wider regional setting. A dialect may also have a vast vocabulary produced due to the contact with the immediate socio-economic environment and kin relationships. These are unique words in local dialects to refer to persons, places, articles of day-to-day usage. The dialect is a symbol of group's identity and learned by children in the natural context of family and community life. But language is a developed system that encompasses many dialects spoken in a specific region. For example, languages of India such as Hindi, Bengali, Assamese, Punjabi, Marathi, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam, Tamil, etc. are composed of several dialects which are in use in different regions. However, it is not necessary that dialect is exclusively a minor part of a single or particular language only. Generally, it happens to be a mixed kindred of languages spoken in the neighborhood. For instance, there are several tribal dialects which appear to be a blend of Hindi and Gujarati, Hindi and Marathi, Kannada and Malayalam, Kannada and Tamil, etc. There is a large variety of dialects having Hindi words in large number. Similarly, we find that within a state language there are several dialects. Therefore, it is said that dialects change every 3 miles. Now let us see the relationship between language and education. There are 2 aspects of the relationship between language and education. The first considers it as an asset and the second treats it as an instrument. Every child in the school tries to gain mastery over the language of instruction as an asset in the beginning and later uses the same language as an instrument to further its interests. Now let us see language as an asset. Language is a complex system which encompasses forms of symbolic interactions such as gestures, signs, symbols, some sounds, pause, etc. Children generally learn to speak the language of region easily. Thus, they enter into context of bilingual skills, which involves speaking fluently in one's own dialect on the one hand, and also in the regional language, which happens to be the medium of education in school. Storytelling, skits, and drama are the best activities to teach language to children in the age group of 4 to 7 years. The stories which are designed for children generally contain conversations. The reading of such stories helps them to grasp language easily. In classrooms, children get opportunities to learn ways by which they can express themselves through the spoken language. However, the language which is the medium of instruction is taught with letters, words and sentences along with their pronunciations and grammar. Such an exercise is followed by writing skills acquired by children who would attempt to construct words and sentences by joining the letters. Thus, they learn alphabetic symbols, graphophonemic relationships, letter-sound relationships, basic vocabulary, and comprehension strategies. This is also substantiated by writing sentences using their own imagination. As they grow up reading textbooks, storybooks, comics, literary works, this reading enhances the ability of children in using language for effective communication. Thus, language becomes an asset for the child and also forms an important ingredient of personality development. Language as an instrument is also an important point to be studied. The education system has a great responsibility in imparting language as a tool to gain knowledge. Students must be encouraged to read more books than those prescribed in the curriculum. Essay writing is an exercise that must actually instill creativity. They experience the real pleasure of employing their vocabulary to express their ideas. Therefore, the success of an educational enterprise rests on designing a curriculum that helps students to develop both their spoken and written language skills. It becomes an instrument both for gaining and producing knowledge at higher educational levels. Now let us see the role of school in developing the languages. The school provides a space for children to enhance their language skills. The function and form of speech may vary significantly between the home and the school. In school, children coming from different class backgrounds bring with them their home language. They happen to learn many terms and concepts from their classmates in the course of interaction. However, from the education point of view, there is a demand for precision, exposition, novelty, breadth of topics, and transmission of information in the school. This is done through the language adopted as medium of instruction, which may be the state language or English, as in the case of many Indian schools. Of course, knowledge increases with varied activities taking place in the school. As one passes through different situations and activities in school, one acquires a new vocabulary. It is acquired from travel, reading books, meeting people, seeing different socio-economic conditions, and by watching cultural differences. When the depth of vocabulary increases, invariably conceptual clarity develops. As children become more and more mature, their vocabulary gets organized and they learn to use appropriate words or concepts to analyze different situations. Culture and language. Language is called the vehicle of culture. It is through language that people understand their culture. As individuals grow up, the realization that they have to understand the abstract element of their culture, such as customs, beliefs, values, also dawns on them. Education is generally entrusted with the responsibility of transmitting values and practices associated with that culture, and it is through language that this transformation takes place. Since education is expected to conserve culture as well as create the atmosphere required for change, those involved in the teaching learning process must realize the need to respect local cultures, which also include the language spoken by people practicing these cultures and also the objects and experiences that are part of their everyday life. But in many schools across the world, there is no space for multilingualism, and education is imparted in a language that many children do not easily comprehend. Also, their cultural artifacts or symbols have no place in the curriculum content. In such a setup, they feel alienated and are likely to lose interest in education itself. However, if an attempt is made to prepare textbooks by using words familiar to them, not only would they feel comfortable in the classroom, but also develop a sense of confidence in themselves. Language and curriculum. The place of language in academic curriculum varies according to the level and goals of educational system. Educational programs for young children generally emphasize on language learning. Since the thrust is on acquainting them with the world around them, instructional programs emphasize on developing spoken language skills. At the elementary level, the main feature of curriculum is the reading of stories designed for young children. They may also have opportunities to learn how to express themselves through written language, including opportunities to learn new letters, words, sentences, and text structures, and also how to put together a written story. In schools and colleges, teachers and students use spoken and written language to communicate with each other. The learning process involves presentation of tasks, engagement in academic content, assessment of learning, exposition of knowledge, and display of skills. All these are dependent on the acquisition of language skills, particularly in reading the prescribed textbooks. However, it is important to cultivate the habit of reading general books, newspapers, and other information sources if one wants to expand both his or her knowledge as well as language base. The entire process of understanding the curriculum and applying its contents to one's own field or life takes place only by sharpening one's linguistic skills. According to M.A.K. Halliday, the relationship between language and education can be divided into three heuristic categories: learning a language, learning through language, and learning about language. Learning a language involves they learn terms to identify the socio-cultural surroundings at home and outside. Learning a language for purposes of speaking and learning the same for purposes of writing are two different experiences. Since all learners are not exposed to similar home and neighborhood environments, their capacities to learn language differ. Teachers need to put an extra effort in case of those learners who are not familiar with the language of education. In fact, in such cases, teaching the essence of language through which knowledge is being transmitted is more of a critical challenge than the actual content itself. Alternately, in the case of learners who are inherently energetic as language learners and possess a unique capacity to imbibe linguistic skills, schools are expected to create a stimulating language environment and provide them with the tools they need to develop their spoken and writing skills. Although teachers provide instruction, the methodologies adopted in the classroom must relate to students' needs and interests. It must also be remembered that students must be allowed to engage in multilingual activities so as to give them a sense of comfort that speaking in their mother tongue or in the local dialect is acceptable. Now let us see learning through language. There are several language exercises to build knowledge as well as share that knowledge with others. Using flashcards is a method that helps to young children to develop narrative performance skills. Each card contains a word which a teacher shows and asks children to describe it. The words are presented depending on the age and ability of children to speak out. The flashcards are arranged in such a way as to attempt topic coherence, sequence of events, structuring narrative events, and adjusting narrative in the audience. This exercise is also known as sharing time, where teacher and students take part together in building language capabilities and knowledge enhancement. Such a method shows the close connection that exists between education, language, and cultural variation. The opportunity to learn through language in a classroom situation depends on broad range factors that include class, race, caste, gender, linguistic background, etc. While some students seek out opportunities to engage in an interaction with teachers in the classroom, others either remain silent or speak only when asked to speak. There are also those who experience a sense of diffidence to speak in a classroom in which the language of communication is different from that of mother tongue. In the case of such students, learning through language which is not their comfort zone is not conducive experience. It is in this context that the need of a teacher to possess multiple linguistic abilities needs to be discussed. Now, learning about a language. Classroom practices for language learning range from the study of just spelling and grammar to the study of literatures in different languages. In the current educational scenario, when there are tremendous pressures on teachers for completion of the curriculum and students to strive for success in examinations, there may not be much scope for learning about language, which is the teaching learning medium. In many disciplines, such as for example engineering and pure sciences, the emphasis is not so much on learning the subtleties associated with the language of expression as it is in the content. But in disciplines dealing with human subjects, language is as important as the content because it is the chief instrument of capturing the essence of the subject under study. It is, however, needless to say that learning about a language is a very fascinating field of study that opens up new vistas of knowledge on the socio-historical processes that led to the growth and development of that language and the nature of impact these processes had on the system of education itself. It is also true that time and again the issue of the importance of language in education has come up for serious discussion. In the recent past, many leading employers of engineering and science graduates have been arguing for the inclusion of language learning in the curriculum because they feel that the younger generation has grown up ignoring the importance of language. In fact, the thrust being placed on building one's communication skills is proof of the growing importance attached to language learning both in formal and non-formal settings. When we speak of the importance of language learning in formal schooling settings, we must refer to the debate over the type of language to be used in academic communication. With mobile phones and other social media dominating the world of communications, symbols and short forms are replacing the traditional ways of language usage. It is not uncommon to see the usage of what is referred to as computer language even in academic presentations and writings. Whether this is the right approach or not is one of the key questions that are going to affect educational practice in future. Now, medium of instruction is a very important question in the modern time. Due to increasing opportunities for physical and social mobility in the recent past, it has become almost imperative for those seeking social mobility to move into multilingual space. The need to learn more than one language is being increasingly felt today because of changes taking place in the employment market. This is an important issue to countries where immigrant groups have to strike a balance between the native language and the language of the country to which they have migrated. For example, in all multilingual societies, there is a debate that surrounds the issue of language learning by children whose native language is not English. Some educators place the sole emphasis on learning English, whereas others advocate a bilingual approach. While protagonists of the mother tongue advocate the theory that education must be imparted in a language with which the child is familiar, proponents of the immersion approach believe that learner must adapt himself or herself to English, which happens to be the medium of education. With the increasing enrollment of rural and first generation learners into higher education, the issue of medium of education is assuming serious proportions in India. More and more learners are now using the mother tongue regional language to write their examinations both at the undergraduate and master's level. Doctoral dissertations are also being written in the mother tongue. While some universities permit academic activities to take place in bilingual or multilingual space, others do not. Referring to this dichotomy that exists in higher education and with a special focus on sociology, Desai and Gogte have observed that our university departments of sociology, in fact all social sciences, need to become bilingual if not multilingual. Both English and regional language should find a place in the process of learning, teaching and research in the departments. English, which holds the key to the vast fund of international knowledge, is essential for maintaining communication between world sociology and Indian sociologists. The regional language is important for equally vital communication between Indian sociologists and Indian society at large. The communication between the intellectual elite and the common man is an essential condition for the survival and success of democracy, to which we are committed. To be able to achieve this communication and to assess and contribute to the social and sociological thought shaping in the world of Indian languages, students and teachers of sociology have to know the regional language with a certain degree of proficiency. It is thus very important for all those concerned to pay serious attention to this issue, at least now. The crisis of medium of instruction is an important point to ponder over. At the school level, the issue of English versus mother tongue at the medium of instruction is reaching a situation of crisis because of the enormous increase that is taking place in the number of private schools across the country. With the majority of these schools offering instruction in the English medium, parents feel that their wards have a bright future ahead and would be ensured a well-paying jobs if they are enrolled in these schools. Rural and poor parents mostly send their children to government schools because they are not in a position to send their children to private schools that offer English medium education. But recent experiences have shown that many parents are making sacrifices to send their wards to private schools because their trust in the state-run school system is on the decline. With the issue of medium of instruction now reaching the courts, a viable alternative is nowhere in sight. The language policy of the state governments entails that the state language or mother tongue should be the medium of instruction up to 5th standard. But this rule has been opposed by the Union of Private Schools and the matter came up before the apex court. The judgment by the Constitutional Bench of Supreme Court offers a significant turn in a series of long-standing dilemmas on the language policy. Thinking through the questions of medium of instruction in the light of the constitutional scheme, the judgment involves 4 important points. Adhering to the rather narrow interpretation of the term mother tongue, the judgment holds that in the context of the Constitution, mother tongue would mean the language of the linguistic minority in a state, and it would be the child or the parents who will have decisive power to declare their language as the mother tongue. Second, the bench also holds that the child or on his behalf, the parent or guardian has a right to freedom of choice with regard to the medium of instruction in which he would like to be educated at the primary stage in the school. Considering a liberal interpretation of the terms freedom of expression, the judgment holds that the right to freedom of speech includes the freedom of a child to be educated in a language of the choice of the child. Finally, the judgment holds that the state cannot impose mother tongue as a medium of instruction. Thus, the verdict privileges Article 19 over others and foregrounds individual liberty and choice as primary drivers of access to education. However, the judgment does not engage with issues of pedagogy, educational philosophy, and instructional practices. From the foregoing discussion, we have understood the significance of language in developing curriculum of education. Particularly, since the education system is from primary to top university and postgraduate level, we understand that the curriculum levels must be different and the inputs must be different. So, language being a very, very significant input in education, there is so much responsibility on the part of the teachers as well as the educationists to see that a perfect way should be discerned in order to make education more reaching to the student. Now, for example, I have spoken in the English language. Why this particular language has been chosen? Because of the reachability. So thereby we understand that a language gets its significance in the multilingual society because of its ability to reach. Now the system of education should be readapted to a new situation wherein the regional languages should also get sufficient support, because the regional languages are there to carry the culture of the regions, and if a particular language like English becomes a monopoly, then the regional languages will find their decline. So this should be avoided, and this avoidance is the responsibility of the education system as such. Therefore, by understanding this particular module, we will develop a kind of mind wherein each language is important because it is the vehicle of culture, and preserving the cultures through language is a significant responsibility on the part of all educated persons, all civilians, as well as all the parents and students. And in this regard, I feel it very strongly that the learning of education should be given more importance along with the study of technology, science, and humanities.